Hey, what's up, y'all? I'm Scott.
I'm Shatay, and we're the Hazes.
And welcome to the Love Haze, where we rethink how we love life.
So in life, there will always be a haze, but we can still choose to show up healed and whole anyways. And so today, we want to talk about taking the L. We want to reframe what it means to take the L. Traditionally, when people say to just take the L, it means take the loss. But we want to talk about what it means to just take a lesson from a situation. So taking the L. For me, I've recently had a very trying experience where I was personally attacked and even lied on. And what was most hurtful for me is just that my character was attacked. As someone who does a lot of work, a lot of work on who I am, who I'm becoming, how I show up in the world, being kind, honoring other people's humanity, leading with love and light, for someone to experience something different than that is really hurtful. Like it really took me out. It was a tough week for me. And in my more enlightened moments, I was able to see, hurt people, right? So I was able to acknowledge that. But yeah, I still didn't feel good. And so I've been processing through that for the whole week. But what about you? Has there been a situation recently where you felt like it was just it was a tough situation?
So I think for me, I think your situation actually kind of brought up some old stuff for me. A situation that I experienced at work where I felt like I was being personally attacked behind some stuff that was really it was more so about business. And I think because of the way that I approach relationships and all of my relationships, like work relationships, like friendships, everything is personal for me. So a lot of people say that it's just business, right? But there's always this degree of me where things are personal, right? So I pride myself on my relationships and relationship building, and I was put into this situation, and something happened that I felt like was not fair. And I expected so much more of this other person because of the relationship that I felt like I built, right? I felt like I built this safe space where we can have conversations and these things don't have to go down this way. And it did not happen that way. And it was absolutely personal for me. I absolutely felt attacked. I was absolutely like, I ain't ever with this person ever again in life because they have crossed me. And how dare you? And so it was just difficult for me.
You brought up an interesting point about expecting the same from the other person. And I definitely felt that this whole time. Like, I thought, surely if I put out love and kindness and grace for your humanity, surely I would get the same in return. And I think that expectation was even harder to digest, meaning that it wasn't met. That expectation wasn't met. And that was a disappointment. I think that was one of the toughest parts of it for me.
And I think also what it forced me to take a look at, though, was then everybody doesn't define those things in the same way. Right? So people will absolutely believe for them that they've somehow given you some type of grace.
That's true.
And somehow that they are leaning into establishing or having established a relationship in the same way that you have. And that they're doing right by you, right? And sometimes people are just not that way. And I think that what we can't escape is taking things personal because it is all personal. And we just don't get to, pick the portion of it that we want to say that's all business or whatever. Because some people, when it comes down to it, they're always going to, that part of their humanity is going to choose them, right? And they're going to feel victimized. And they're going to go into defense mode and all that kind of stuff. So, what do you do with that? Like understanding that people are going to be people. And also that just because you give off this thing that you can't automatically expect to get it in return. But more importantly, not in the same way. Because everybody wasn't raised the same way. People haven't developed. Everybody sees the way that they live life, like through their own lens, their own perception of the world,
their own experiences, their own background, all of that. That's very true. So then, what makes the situation particularly difficult? One thing that you touched on that is a sore spot for me, even as you were talking about it, is when people play the victim. But then I'm also, in an enlightened moment, can see that I could also be, that could be said about me. Like, I'm making this about me. That not expectations not being met, being attacked personally. Those are all things that made it hard. Like, what's the thing that makes the situation, a particularly difficult one for you when it comes to, I guess, relationship and people?
Well, I think for me, the most important thing is for me to understand that there's a portion of it that is about me, right? And it's also about the language that I use, and not to attack your language, but saying that someone is playing the victim, like in their mind they are a victim, right? Sure. Yeah. I am being victimized in this situation because for them their expectations weren't met in some type of way, and in our humanity, the first thing that we do when we are attacked, if you're not prepared for that attack, right, you throw on your shoulder pads and you get ready to fight. And a lot of times people are not thinking about fairness in that moment. They're thinking about, how do I win, or how do I survive this particular situation? How do I survive this encounter where I wasn't prepared to be attacked by this person that I trust, right? And so you may be seeing it from that same lens, like, this is an unexpected attack from this person.
100%. And I was thinking that, but I also, my first inclination was not to swing back, even though I was feeling attacked. It was like, wait, let's take a step back. Definitely the trust has been broken at this point. Yes, I feel absolutely attacked. I'm pissed. I'm hurt. I'm all of the above. But my first response was not to come out swinging the way that the other person did.
And I think that's okay. That's more about your personal style, right? Yeah. So my personal style is definitely like, I'm getting ready to fight. Like, so that's my personal style. So if you come at me, bro, right, I'm getting ready to fight. We can talk about everything else later. Yeah. But you've attacked my character. Yeah. You've taken advantage of my kindness, right? And that's from this idea that's kind of rooted in, I don't give everybody that, right? I could be treating you like I treat the rest of the world, like with my armor on and, sword and shield in hand, helmet, all that other kind of stuff, but I've given you permission to be in this safe space. And this is what you did with it. How dare you? Yeah. Now I got to smite you. You know what I'm saying? So my first inclination is to fight, and we'll talk about the rest of the shit later, because now I got to have you. And so you'll know that I didn't have to be giving you this level of grace. Yeah. And I'm not saying that that's right. Yeah. I'm saying that that's my style a lot of times. And a lot of times it takes me pulling me out of the situation to be like, pump your brakes a minute. Like, it's not about you.
Yeah, my style is definitely shut down. Like, immediately, like, cool, we ain't got to talk no more. I ain't got to breathe the same air as you no more. And the way that I fight, honestly, is with my words. So let me draft up this letter real quick. I can pull a Sandra K real quick. Write a letter to somebody. I'm going
That's my mother-in-law,
the president of the president of the president. So, and I find that I'm able to process things better when I can write it out. That gives me, when I have to verbally express myself, it's always more heated, right? More emotional. I always forget points that I wanted to bring up and be like, dang, why didn't I say that? Versus me being able to like sit down and write it. So I know that I shut down, and that was definitely one of my first responses. Like, bet we don't have to talk no more. We don't have to do nothing. I don't have to see your face. But in reality, I don't have that option with this particular situation. So yeah, all of those things just make it hard and pretty sucky. And especially, like you said, like when you are not expecting it, like when it's out of the blue, then it's like,
and it's very much a difference in how we process pain, how we process injury, how we deal with when things happen that we don't expect. Right? Some people come out swinging. Some people absolutely withdraw and, come up with a strategy.
Yes, ma'am.
And I attack first, ask questions later, and will typically do the healing part of it on the back end, like write things out. We'll have prayed and all that kind of stuff. But on the front end, I done flipped tables in the temple, like, because you pissed me off, and now I have to do this part. Like, you did this, there's this consequence. We can talk about it later in therapy, but right now I'm getting ready to tear your shit up. And it's not for everybody. And I am trying to get better with that. And, you know, I'm just a work in progress, man. But, you know, getting past the pain and the injury first. And, learning how to do that part without, you know, destroying, you know, everything that's, you know, without the wrath of Scott. You know, that's the growing part for me. That's what I still have to do.
Yeah. Which I appreciate, because I think there is something for us to learn from each other in that. Right? I think it's okay to use my voice or to come back quickly, right? Mm-hmm. To temper it with a little bit of flying. I mean, the same thing could be said for you. Like, it's okay to, like, maybe learn to take a step back first before you come out swinging. So I think, you know, everybody's work in progress, and it is what it is. So then, what's the haze? Like, taking the L. And I can tell you absolutely what it is for me. It is coming up out your feelings to be the bigger person. That is not fun, especially when I want to be in my feelings for a little while. I want to be justified. I want to be validated. So the haze is coming out of your feelings enough to be still. For me, it's being still to clear my head, to learn what the lesson is. Like, for me to be silent enough to receive what it is that I'm supposed to receive from this. And that requires some getting out of your own way. That is a choice that you have to actively make. And let me tell y'all something. This is not a straight line, meaning like I've made the choice. Now this is the lesson, and I see it, and woosah, we're moving forward. No, it's like I made the choice, but also in 5 minutes, I'm back in my feelings again. Right. Or the next day, or it'll be a couple of days, and I'm like, you know what? This is a plan. I've gotten my emotions out. I see clearly. I've prayed about it. And then be triggered again and be like, actually, let me flip over the table as well. How dare that person do that to me? Or be in tears, or just like feeling all the things. And so there's definitely a back and forth in that you have to actively choose to like take the lesson and heal as you move forward. For me, at least.
The portion of that, though, that, you know, I want to make sure that people understand, and also that is important for me, is that healing is not like this destination that you arrive to. Like, I'm always kind of healing. I'm always kind of dealing with something. Yeah. Right? And for me, it's always going to be about being able to pull my ego out of it, right? Being able to pull myself out of whatever the situation is. Because a lot of times what happens is I insert me into it, and I make it about who I am as a person, right? And how dare you take advantage of this spot that I've allowed you to have in my life. And that's ego. And that's this feeling like, you know, I allowed you to be here, and you don't have to be on the front seat of my life, and da-da-da-da-da, and that kind of thing. That's really, that before. Yeah. You know, and all those types of things that we tell ourselves that really are not about growth, right? And about what true healing really looks like. Yeah. Healing is not getting to the point where things never impact you. It's about being able to encounter a situation, maybe even be injured by it, but being able to remove the ego and feeling like it's a personal attack against you, and being able to do the work so it makes you a better person. Yeah. And so that you then have experienced that test and have a testimony, and then can, you know, enhance your skills to be able to do better in the next season or whatever the next test or trial may be for you. And so often I get so caught up in being like, how dare you? You know, don't you ever even come at me like that, because I ain't the one kind of stuff. And I think we hold ourselves up from our healing and from getting to the next level of things, because we feel like people should never even come at us like that. And that's really not what it's about. And a lot of my work is removing my humanity out of it, or that part of my ego that gets bruised, pulling that out of it, and having to stop expecting people never to injure.
But that's hard. Like, that is hard
Yeah.
because it hurts. It doesn't feel good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could feel whatever your response is. For some it's tears, for some it's anger,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, and then how that shows up for the person, like that's just not a pleasurable experience.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, we can in our more like mature selves be like, actually this is what it is, see the situation
Mm-hmm.
on all sides, and then make a choice on how to respond versus react, right? Which I know is important. It's something that I'm always trying to work on. Like, how do I respond to this situation and not just react out of my ego?
Mm-hmm.
But that takes some like skill building, some muscle. Like, you have to grow that muscle for sure.
And so you have people who will experience those types of things and say, hey, I just don't have those types of relationships ever at work, right? Or I don't deal with people like that. Or you meet guys who say, I just don't even have any male friends. Or you meet women who say, I just don't have any female friends.
Yeah.
And so then it's a decision, right? It's a decision that you make. So this thing is gonna grow you, right? To be able to be better in the next season. Or you can decide that I'll just be closed off from the world in that way. And I just don't let that many people in my world, and that's how I live life. So you get to make a decision about what you want to do with the injury and with the pain that you've experienced. Do you want to close yourself off and never have to experience that kind of pain again, or do you want to grow into something different? And I know the prayers that I consistently pray are that, enhance my territory, like enlarge, for the advancement of, right? Not for the advancement of me, but that means you're going to have to deal with people. You're going to have to deal with their humanity and their experience of the world. And the hope for me is that I'm able to share something from my experience that will help somebody else, but also be able to glean something from them that helps me at another point in my life. And that's the part that helps me pull myself out of it, because it ain't about you.
Right. That's true.
In the moment when I'm injured, hell yes, I feel like it's about me, because you hurt me. But you hurt my human self.
Yeah.
Right? But my spiritual self is being stretched by this.
That is real. I don't remember where I heard this from or read it. It's probably out of a book, but their idea that there is no loss. There is only spiritual gain. So there is no disappointment. Everything is for the betterment, the growth of your your spirit, which is true. And so what I'm hearing as you talk is like, yes, we can say reframe the L to be take the lesson. I also heard like you can either heal or you can be hardened by the experience.
Absolutely.
Like, so either you learn from it and you grow, or either you're hardened and you're like closed off and you stay, and that keeps you stuck. Like, you can't move forward. I also know not only does it keep you stuck, if you don't learn the lesson in that situation, like you have to repeat it until you get it. And I don't want that. Like, I don't need to do it again. I don't need no do-overs. I don't need no, like, I'm good. Like, this was enough for me.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think one of the things that you said really stuck with me, just because, and I guess this is really what, learning to take the L, like take the lesson, is really about. Like, not many things have to be a loss. I think we determine that things are a loss, right? And the reframing is the work that we have to do ourselves. That's the healing work, right? And knowing that this is not a loss in this season. Like, there's something that you're supposed to glean from this experience, right? It's only a loss a lot of times if we make it a loss. If we make it about this other person, right? Or we make it about, I'm really truly losing something. Sometimes relationships are not the same moving forward. And it's not necessarily about the loss of that particular relationship so much as it is about what I learned in that season and what I'm able to glean moving forward for the next relationship that I have to deal with, whether it's work or personal or intimate, or whatever the case may be. What have I learned in that past season or in that last situation that made me be able to nip something in the bud before it got really out of control?
Yeah.
Right? How was I able to set a framework for this relationship so I don't have to be at that point again? Or it shows that I learned something from that.
Okay, so then how do you know what the lesson is? Like, when you've gone through something, at what point do you get the lesson if you choose to look for it? Is it like at the end of it, in the midst of it? And I'm sure it varies person to person. And then how do you know that that's the lesson? Like, what's the thing in your opinion? For me, I get these moments, like these aha moments, because I'm an overthinker. So I literally have processed the thing a gazillion times. And at a certain point, something just drops in my spirit that's like, I just hear something that is the takeaway from me. Or if I'm talking it out with someone else, they say something that really is like, aha, like Oprah's aha moments, where I'm like, okay, I understand better. Let me make the adjustment. What is it? How do you know? Like,
It's usually some type of confirmation that will come through something that I'm listening to or something that I'm reading, and it'll just be I believe always that it's my spiritual connection, right?
Yeah.
And that God will drop a little nugget and be like, that's what I have for you. Right there. I'm like, and there have been times when I have not been willing to receive that because I'm still like in my fight mode. Like I'm like, I hear you, God, but also I got this smoke for this person on Monday morning, and I promise you, right after they get this smoke, I'm gonna listen to what you said. But a lot of times it's about me being obedient, and that's a whole separate part of my work that I still have to actively work on. But normally God will drop something in my spirit, or give me something that I'm reading, or send a sermon my way that helps me make the connection and helps me learn and figure out which direction I should be going. And I'll be like, okay, I went through that to learn this thing that can help me. And then it won't be much longer after that somebody will ask me about something that's similar to that situation. And I'll be like, you know what? I just experienced X, Y, and Z, and this is what happened. And I'm like, okay, that's what I was supposed to learn.
That's a good point. That even made me think about just the idea of sometime later. Like, sometimes I've been in situations where I've repeated the thing, right? Because I didn't get it the first time. It just appears differently. So for me, the situations didn't even present themselves exactly the same way, but there were nuances that made the gist of them the same. And I remember taking small things away and not repeating them. But it wasn't until like sometime later when I was able to take a look at the bigger picture where I was like, okay, I see the trend in the error of my ways. And all of these things have now positioned me to know that, like, this is a lesson for me. This is how I make the adjustment moving forward, and keep that adjustment. So, yeah, it could be different for everybody, but I think what's important is that, you sit with it enough to even figure out or listen or lean into whatever that lesson could be. And it could be, still small voice within, confirmation through music, conversations with other people, through a book that you read, through a sermon. Like, you can get drops of guidance, right, from God, in almost anything.
The other part of it is, for me, is when I know that it's like the old folks used to say, like, if you had something, well, I ain't even gonna go there. What I will say is, I know when something has, I've gleaned what I need to glean from a situation, when I'm able to pull myself out of it enough to know that I'm no longer waiting on that person to get what's coming to them. I'm not waiting on justice for this other person, right? I'm not waiting to be vindicated in some way. Sometimes you just want to sit back and get what's coming to them. And then it ain't over for me until they get what's coming to them, right? For me, it's about me, right? So everything that I need to heal is within me. Right.
Preach.
And my healing is not dependent on this person dealing with their injury. Because whatever made them feel the way that they felt to attack me, that's their injury, their pain,
That's
their
their
healing
stuff,
that they
yeah.
have to do, right? And if
Yeah.
I'm waiting on justice for them, then I can't be over here talking about grace and healing and all this
Yeah.
other thing, but I'm really on the sideline waiting on them to get theirs, right? And I'm walking around here talking about karma and all this other stuff, and what's really happening in that moment is I ain't learning what the hell I'm supposed to learn. I'm walking around injured, still not healed, right? And doing all these other things that are not really centered in healing and wholeness and what we're really talking about. Because if I'm healed, then the healing that you got to do ain't got nothing to do with me. Like I can offer you a referral, but that's about it. So all the other work is my own internal work. And when I want to see you get yours, then I'm still not healed.
That's a word for me 1000%. Let me tell you something about me, y'all. I am the person that loves the moments at the end of the movies when like the revenge is served,
Mm-hmm.
when there's the get back, or when the scales have been, tipped to be even now. Like the person did this awful thing, and then the good guys like get the.
Mm-hmm.
I live for those moments. They make me feel so good in my spirit and in my ego, and yeah, I'm the one that waits for it, like.
But then we have to circle back, right, to how most of us view ourselves as the heroes in the story, right?
Yeah.
And then this other person or this other situation is the villain and is villainous, and then it has to come to this successful conclusion, right? And it ain't.
In real life, it's not like that,
right? Because then you're making this story that's all about you, and you're the hero, and you swooped in to save the day. And it's really not. We're here and we're living this life, and we're trying to navigate this space as people who just really want to be better, right? Mm-hmm. Not be suckers, but to be better and give our best and do our best day in and day out, right? And I don't know. I just, what if I don't have to be the hero? What if I don't have to save anybody? What if I don't have to see the karma played out?
I don't want to save anybody. I just want to see the karma.
I was waiting for
I
to let you get to it. I don't have to be the
person to do it. However, karma, as long as it's done, I could delegate. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying.
The unhealed stuff. Okay, so then, what helps you through difficult situations?
A number of things. It really helps me to have a sounding board, which you are for me all the time.
You're welcome.
But it helps me to, I like to feel connected, to know that I'm not the only person that has experienced this. So I oftentimes find myself looking for articles or books or like stories that have shown me how other people have gotten through it. I'm definitely a visual learner, so seeing those illustrations, those examples is really key for me. Prayer, right, is always great. And for me these days, it's been more like a physical embodiment of prayer. So I always love a good walk, especially like Silver Comet Trail, like in the trees, walking in the silence, listening for God, waiting for the impression, saying what I need to say, whether that be through tears or through prayer. Like those things really help me stay grounded and to come out on the other side. What about you?
I think on some level, just kind of like stopping in a moment to acknowledge the injury or the pain. And then I still have to have that moment to, I won't say an acting out moment, but a moment where I feel like I'm flipping the tables. So I could go and get a good workout in the gym and just really need to do some lifting and that kind of thing. But even in that moment, like I'm allowing that pain and that injury to kind of maybe push me a little bit harder. To kind of feel like I'm getting it out. But also it kind of, for me, in that moment, I'm not filled. Not necessarily with the rage, but with the idea that I've been injured. Because when I'm filled up with that, there's not room for then the healing to be able to drop in. So being able to exert that part of it, then there's room.
Create space, basically.
Is making space for me to be able to receive whatever spiritual nugget I may glean from the situation. So that's helpful for me. To a big degree, definitely having a sounding board when we have almost every evening conversation is kind of about how our days went and that kind of thing. And I also do some consultation with coworkers and stuff like that at work. But most of my consultation really comes from just our relationship and being able to kind of bounce things off of you.
All right. So now it's time for our music for this moment. What does this taking L's and learning lessons feel like for you?
So there's this song called Lessons. It's an acoustic version by, hope I'm saying her first name right, Sinead Hardnett. And in the song, she's really just talking about how she doesn't need another lesson. And even though we're talking about that, this is just kind of music for the moment. It's just kind of how I feel. Like, I always feel like on the other side of stuff, like, Lord Jesus,
I don't need another lesson.
I don't need another. Right. You gotta sing for the people. But that's truly how I feel, right?
Yeah.
Like, we ask, to be stretched and all these other things, but I don't want another lesson.
We
that's
just don't
gonna
want
call me
to,
pain.
Right. We want to feel comfortable. Like, enlarge us as we in our comfort zones, and that's not real.
So yeah, that's my jam though. Y'all bump that, and I promise you'll have it on repeat.
'Cause I don't wanna make the same mistake again. I don't need another lesson. I don't need another reason, 'cause they only make it worse. I don't need another lesson.
So what about you? What's your contribution as it relates to maybe like a resource that folks can use?
Listen, let me tell you what I had to pull out on today to get me back right together. And I think we've talked about this before, but it is the 4 agreements. Don Miguel Ruiz. And in the book, he really just talks about the agreements that people make with themselves. That dictates how people live their lives. And so the second agreement is to not take things personally, right? Let me see if I can find it. I just have to read this one little segment that just really helped me today. Don't take anything personally is the second agreement. But here goes the thing that stood out to me for this particular situation. Whatever you think, whatever you feel, I know your problem is not my problem.
Absolutely.
It's the way that you see the world. It's nothing personal because you're dealing with yourself, not with me. That was really... Others are going to have their own opinion according to their belief system. So nothing they think about me is really about me. Yes. It's about them. So someone might even tell me, what you're saying is hurting me. But it's not what I'm saying that's hurting you. Now get this. It's that you have wounds that I touched by what I said. It's not my words. It's that what I've said has triggered some wound that is within you. And so that really helped me put things in perspective to try to take myself away from it. Because even though it is a hurtful situation, I have to recognize that it's not really always about me. It's about how they view the world, all the things that they bring with them, their backgrounds, their past experiences. Yeah. And whatever conversation we had just triggered, something that they already had going on. So definitely we'll link this below, the 4 agreements. Check it out.
So I think that's all we're going to cover today. As always, we appreciate y'all rocking with us. We're the Hazes. And until next time, we challenge y'all to rethink the way you love your life.
Turn up.
Peace.
Why'd you take so long to come to me? Oh, baby. And love. Tell me, were you hiding from me all the time? Each time.